Once you've installed the SAP edition and you open up the cockpit for the first time, this is what you'll see. You'll see groups of tiles categorized by their functionality, from administration, design, monitoring, down to security and settings. Each tile represents a tool or a set of artifacts or information. Some tiles can be interacted with to change what they're showing. So for example, here we can hide the top downloads from the store. You can also add any tile to your favorites, which will add it to the bottom left of the cockpit for easy access. In the top right, you can switch between different views. So if you're a designer, you can switch to the design mode and it will only show you tools relevant to that role. The same for developer and for DevOps. If you click this question mark button, it will open the documentation for the SAP edition. In the top right of the cockpit, you can see all of your personal settings. Here you can change the theme of the cockpit, as well as the cockpit and app designer color, along with a few other settings. Clicking on a tile will open the application. Most apps open within the cockpit. Here on the left panel you can see any applications which are open, and you can click the Neptune ball to go back home. Here you can open any number of applications, interact with them, and switch between them simply by clicking on the left panel. If you'd like to close any applications, just expand the panel and hit the cross. The cockpit is designed to make a developer's life as easy as possible, so there's lots of built-in functionalities. For example, in the last used artifacts tile, you can click on any of the recently used artifacts to open the Cockpit tool straight to that particular component. So for example, we can open the tile tool straight to this particular tile simply by clicking on the artifact name. When interacting with artifacts within the cockpit, to change any details, you'll need to open the artifact in edit mode. When you're done, you can save the data and then go back into display mode. Whilst in edit mode, no one else within the cockpit can enter that artifact and change any details to do with it. Only your user can edit it. Let's open the app designer, and this is unique as it opens in a new tab. And let's have a go at building our first application. So here we've just opened the application designer, and we can see in the top right there's a button to create a new app. Here you can see a list of all the applications, or if you change this drop down, a list of all the building blocks within the system. You can even filter between everyone's or just your own. For now, let's create a new application for this e-learning, and we'll call it Lloyd eLearning. As soon as we create the application, we're shown the application settings by default. Here you can add a description, a title or a group, as well as set the application class. You can also change the UI5 version from the default one recommended by Neptune. It's also possible to change the application to a building block and back to an application here. This is the main design screen of the application designer. On the bottom left here, you can see all of the SAP UI5 components, which can be dragged and dropped into the panel above, and on the far right, we can see the properties panel of any component that we have selected. Let's start building our app by adding the basics. We start with a shell, an app, and then we can add a page. And as you can see, now we have an element selected. All the properties are showing on the far right of the screen. We can save, activate, and then preview our application in the middle of the designer. Now let's add a bar to our page, and this will prompt us for what type of bar. We'll set it to be a footer, and then we'll add some content to the right-hand side of the footer. And in this case, we'll put a button inside of the content. If we save and activate again, now we can see our footer on our page with our button in the bottom right. The application designer will automatically give you an error if you have duplicate names in your component tree. So here, if we copy and paste the button and we try activating, it will warn us we have a duplicate name for the button. So we can just delete the extra one. Now, on our page, we can rename the component itself to page contacts, and then we can scroll down on the properties and we can type in contacts into the title property. Now, if we save and activate, we'll see that title reflected on the page itself. We can do a similar job for the button here. We'll enter some text. We'll say add contact. And if we save and activate, we can see that text now appearing on our button. We can instead use an icon from the icon explorer here, instead of adding a plus sign in the text. So now we have an icon instead. Next, let's add another page to our application. So we drop it inside the app component and we can rename it to page add view contact. Now, let's set up the button so when we click it, it will take us from our contact page to our add view contact page. So here we can open the press event for the button, and we can see a range of code snippets available if we right click within the code editor. Here under SAP UI5 and other, we can find the navigation code snippet. And we can basically get rid of all of this apart from the very first uncommented line, which shows us the syntax for navigating between pages. We just need to replace next page with the name of the page we'd like to go to, and then replace the name of the OApp with the name of our own app component. In this case, it's just the word app. Now, when we save and activate, we can test our application and we can see the button takes us to the second page. Let's give this second page a title, so it's clearer that we've navigated there. We'll call it add or edit contact. And then we're also going to utilize the press event built into the page, which as you can see here is the nav button press. Now in order to turn this button on, we simply change the show nav button property to true. And now when we navigate to our second page, we'll have this button in the top left, which we can add some functionality to. And it makes sense here to simply navigate back to our page contacts, the first page that we land on. So we'll add that navigation code snippet back in, and we simply swap out next page to page contacts, and we rename the component to app. Now we can navigate to our second page and back to our first one. Finally, let's save, activate, and then we click this button to run the app in its own standalone tab, and we can see all the functionality works here too.